Mole was a quiet little fellow who lived a very sheltered life underground. For a long time he was quite happy digging and making his cozy home beneath the earth. But one spring morning, something strange happened. Mole suddenly felt a restless stirring deep inside him, a feeling he hadn't noticed before. It was as if the earth itself was calling him to explore the world above, the bright and lively world he had never truly seen. Without a second thought, Mole dropped his spade and scampered up through the dark tunnels until he popped out into the sunshine. He blinked and sniffed the fresh air. The sky was a wide, bright blue, and the grass was soft and green under his paws. Everything was new and wonderful. Mole could hardly believe his eyes. The smell of flowers, the buzzing of bees, the song of birds in the trees. It was a whole new world, and Mole was eager to see more. He wandered through fields and meadows, feeling the warm sun on his back and marveling at every little thing. As he wandered, he came to a sparkling river, where the water flowed gently, reflecting the fluffy white clouds. There, beside the riverbank, sat a slender creature with long, soft fur, busy polishing a tiny boat. "Good morning," said Mole, a bit shy but curious. The creature looked up and smiled. "Good morning, I'm Ratty, and I live here by the river." Mole felt a sudden rush of happiness. "I'm Mole," he said. "I've just come up from underground." "Well, Mole," said Rat, "you're very welcome here. There's plenty to see and do on the river. Would you like to come for a ride?" Mole nodded eagerly. He had never been in a boat before, but Rat's excitement was catching. Together they pushed the little boat into the water and climbed aboard. The boat rocked gently as Rat began to row, and Mole felt the soft splash of the river all around him. The sun sparkled on the water, and the riverbank rolled by lined with trees and wildflowers. As they floated down the river, Rat told Mole stories about the life on the river, the fish that darted beneath the surface, the birds that nested in the trees, and the changing seasons that painted the landscape with color. Mole listened with wide eyes, soaking it all in. "Here we are," said Rat, stopping near a patch of reeds. "Would you like to try fishing?" Mole nodded again, and Rat showed him how to hold the rod and cast the line. Mole was clumsy at first, but soon he was patiently waiting, watching the bobbing float on the water. As the afternoon went on, Mole felt happier than he ever had underground. He loved the gentle rocking of the boat, the soft whisper of the wind, and the company of his new friend. Rat was kind and patient, and he didn't mind Mole's many questions. At one point Mole asked, "Is it always so peaceful here?" Rat smiled warmly. "Oh yes, mostly. The river keeps everything calm, but sometimes there's an adventure around the bend. That's the best part, never knowing what might happen next." Mole liked the sound of that. He realized that the world above was full of wonders and surprises, and he wanted to explore as much as he could. After a while they landed on a grassy bank where other animals lived. Mole met a few more friends, friendly frogs that hopped nearby, birds that sang in the trees, and rabbits darting through the bushes. Everything felt alive and full of joy. As the sun began to dip lower, Rat and Mole paddled back to the riverbank. Mole felt tired but happy, with a full heart and new dreams. "Thank you, Rat," said Mole, "for showing me the river. I never knew life could be so wonderful." "You're welcome, Mole," Rat replied with a grin. "There's so much more to see. Tomorrow we'll have even more adventures." And so Mole's quiet underground life was left far behind, replaced by the bright, busy world of the river where friendship, fun, and adventure awaited. As the days grew longer and the sun climbed higher in the sky, Mole and Rat settled into their new routine by the river. The world around them was alive with the fresh colors of spring. The trees were bright with new leaves, the flowers dotted the banks like tiny jewels, and the air was filled with the gentle hum of bees and the sweet songs of birds. Mole had never known such peaceful happiness before. Each morning he would hurry down to the riverbank to meet Rat, who was always ready with a warm smile and a small boat tied at the shore. Together they would glide over the shining water, the boat cutting smoothly through the river's gentle waves. Rat was a master of the river. His long arms pulled the oars with graceful strength, and his stories made every journey an adventure. One of the best things about the river, Rat told Mole one sunny afternoon, is that it changes every day. You never know what you might see around the next bend. And it was true. Sometimes they spotted graceful swans gliding by like little white clouds. Other times mischievous water rats splashed about near the reeds, or dragonflies zipped past, sparkling in the sunlight. The river was full of life and surprises. Mole loved the feeling of the cool water brushing his paws and the soft breeze playing through his fur. He began to look forward to the simple pleasures, the smell of fresh grass, the warmth of the sun, and the gentle rocking of the boat as Rat rowed. One afternoon they stopped at a quiet spot beneath the shady trees. Rat pulled out a fishing rod and showed Mole how to cast the line into the water. Mole was nervous at first. "Will I catch anything?" he asked. "You never know, Mole," Rat said with a wink. "Fishing is as much about patience as skill. Sometimes the fish come to you, and sometimes they don't." Mole sat very still, watching the float bob up and down. Minutes passed, and just when he was starting to get sleepy, there was a sharp tug. Mole pulled the rod up, and to his delight a small fish wriggled on the hook. Rat clapped his hands. "Well done, Mole. You're a natural." As the sun moved slowly toward the west, the two friends enjoyed a picnic by the water's edge. Mole munched on wild berries and fresh bread, while Rat shared stories of the river's history, tales of ancient trees, hidden paths, and the many animals who called the riverbank home. Mole felt as if he had stepped into a dream. The calm, beautiful world of the river was so different from his old life underground. Here everything felt bright and full of promise. "Tell me, Rat," Mole said thoughtfully, "do you ever get tired of the river?" Rat smiled and shook his head. "Never. The river is like a song that never ends. There's always something new to discover, whether it's the way the light dances on the water, or the friends you meet along the way." Their friendship deepened with every passing day. Rat taught Mole how to row, how to listen to the wind, and how to watch the sky for signs of changing weather. Mole in turn shared stories of his old home beneath the earth, dark tunnels, soft mossy walls, and quiet evenings spent by the fire. One evening as they rested on the riverbank, watching the stars begin to twinkle, Mole felt a warm happiness spread through him. He had found a new world, full of friends and adventures, and he knew he was no longer alone. As spring gave way to summer, the river grew even more alive. Frogs sang their cheerful songs, butterflies danced in the sunlight, and the air smelled sweet with honeysuckle and wildflowers. Mole and Rat continued to explore every corner of the river, eager to see what wonders lay ahead. And so, with the river flowing gently beside them, and the promise of endless adventures in their hearts, Mole and Rat enjoyed the most beautiful time of the year. A time of friendship, discovery, and the simple joy of being alive. One bright morning, Rat invited Mole to visit his dear friend Toad, who lived in a grand house called Toad Hall, not far from the river. As they approached, Mole's eyes grew wide with wonder. Toad Hall was a large, splendid mansion with tall windows and a grand front door. It looked like the sort of place a king might live in. "Wait until you meet Toad," Rat said with a smile. "He's quite the character, loud, lively, and full of ideas." When they reached the front door, it swung open with a flourish, and out bounced Toad himself, bursting with energy and excitement. He wore a bright red jacket and a big, proud smile. Mole noticed he seemed to be always moving, talking fast, gesturing wildly, and laughing with a kind of careless joy. "Welcome, welcome," Toad cried, throwing his arms wide. "Come inside. There's so much to see and do. Mole and Rat followed Toad into the grand house, where everything gleamed with polished wood and fine furnishings. But Mole could tell that Toad was more interested in action than in sitting still. Toad is rich and famous, Rat explained as they sat down in the sunny drawing room. He loves adventure, but not the quiet kind we enjoy on the river. No, Toad loves excitement, speed, and new hobbies. Soon enough, Toad began telling them about his latest passion. Have you heard of motor cars? Toad asked, his eyes sparkling. They're these amazing machines that zoom down the roads faster than anything else. I simply must have one. Mole and Rat looked at each other, a little surprised. They had never heard of such a thing. Toad has a new motor car almost every week, Rat said quietly. He's always buying one and then crashing it or losing it somehow. Toad laughed heartily. Why, just last week I took my motor car for a spin down the hill and nearly upset it in the mud. It was thrilling. Nothing like the slow riverboats, I tell you. Mole felt a little uneasy. He liked the calm and steady life by the river, and Toad's reckless excitement seemed a little wild. But Toad was impossible to stop once he got going. Every day brought a new idea or fancy. One morning it was riding a horse. The next day, a gypsy caravan. Then came learning to fly in a hot air balloon. Nothing kept Toad interested for long. Rat and Mole watched as Toad's wild enthusiasm led him into trouble. One time he borrowed a motor car without permission and caused a terrible accident on the road. Another time he was chased by the angry farmer after borrowing a horse and cart and crashing it into a fence. Might I suggest, Toad, Rat said gently one day, that you think twice before diving into your new adventures? Toad waved him off with a grin. Nonsense, Rat. Life is for living boldly. I won't be tied down by dull warnings. Their friend Badger was the only one who could sometimes speak more firmly to Toad. Badger was a serious, strong fellow who lived in the wild woods nearby. He cared deeply for Toad and the others, but he worried about Toad's carelessness. One afternoon, Mole and Rat joined Badger at his cozy home in the woods. Badger sighed as they talked about Toad. Toad means well, Badger said, but his reckless ways will get him into serious trouble if we don't help him learn to behave. Mole nodded. He doesn't seem to listen to anyone except when he's in trouble. That's because he's young and full of spirit, Badger replied kindly. But we must be patient and stand by him. He's our friend. Back at Toad Hall, life continued at a whirlwind pace. Toad would burst into a room announcing his latest craze and sweeping everyone up in his excitement. Mole and Rat sometimes wished Toad could slow down and enjoy the quiet pleasures of the river as they did. One day, as Toad prepared to race a brand new motor car along the country roads, Mole and Rat exchanged worried looks. They knew this was another adventure that could easily go wrong. Toad, Mole said softly, please be careful. But Toad just laughed, his eyes bright with mischief. Careful? That's no fun at all. The only way to live is full speed ahead. And with that, Toad roared off, the engine of his motor car rumbling like thunder, leaving Mole and Rat shaking their heads and hoping for the best. Toad's love for adventure soon turned into a real storm of trouble. Not just little accidents, but serious mishaps that worried all his friends. It all began when Toad got completely obsessed with his new motor car. He bought it one bright morning, gleaming and shiny, and named it with a proud grin. But Toad didn't care about rules or safety. He just wanted to go as fast as he could, zooming up hills and speeding through the village streets, leaving clouds of dust behind him. Faster! Faster! Toad shouted, laughing wildly. Nothing beats the thrill of speed! Mole and Rat watched with wide eyes as Toad raced recklessly, ignoring the warning signs and the angry shouts from farmers and villagers. One day, Toad's wild driving caused a terrible crash. He smashed into a row of trees and overturned the motor car in a muddy ditch. Luckily, Toad wasn't hurt, But the villagers were not happy. They scolded him for being careless and dangerous. "You can't go tearing about like a whirlwind," the village policeman warned sternly. "You'll cause someone to get hurt." But Toad just laughed it off. "I'm a free spirit. No one can tell me how to live." Toad's troubles only grew from there. He borrowed motorcars from other people without asking, wrecking one after another. The villagers became fed up, and soon the law caught up with him. One rainy morning, Toad was arrested for reckless driving and thrown into the village jail. His grand adventures had come to an embarrassing halt. Back at the riverbank, Mole, Rat and Badger were shocked and saddened by Toad's imprisonment. "Poor Toad," Mole said quietly. "He never meant to cause such trouble, but he can't seem to stop himself." "We must help him," said Badger firmly. "Toad is a friend and friends look out for each other." So the three friends began to plan a way to help Toad escape. They knew he wouldn't be able to learn from his mistakes locked away in that gloomy cell. "Where there's a will, there's a way," Rat said, his eyes shining with determination. Meanwhile, Toad was miserable in his jail cell. The walls felt cold and dark, and the lively world outside seemed far away. For the first time, Toad had plenty of time to think, and maybe to understand the trouble his recklessness had caused. But Toad's restless spirit didn't stay quiet for long. One day he spotted an opportunity to escape when the jailer left the door unlocked. With a burst of energy, Toad darted out into the street, laughing wildly as he ran. He raced through the village, dodging angry townsfolk and barking dogs, until he reached the riverbank where Mole and Rat were waiting. "Toad!" cried Rat, relieved. "You're free!" "Yes!" Toad shouted, still catching his breath. "Freedom tastes sweet, my friends!" But Toad's troubles were far from over. In his excitement, he ran straight into the wild wood, a dark, tangled forest full of dangers and strange creatures. Toad wandered through the trees, lost and frightened. He had to hide from the fierce weasels and stoats that ruled the wood, creatures who didn't like visitors. Toad quickly learned that the wildwood was no place for reckless behavior. "I've got to be clever," he muttered to himself. "I can't just rush about anymore." As he moved carefully through the woods, Toad began to think more about his actions. He realized that his wild adventures had caused pain to his friends and neighbors. For the first time, he felt a little ashamed. Meanwhile, back at the river, Mole, Rat and Badger worried about their friend's safety. "Toad must learn to take care of himself and those around him," Badger said wisely. "He's strong, but only if he's wise." And so, the story of Toad's reckless joy turned into a lesson. Not just for him, but for all who loved the river and the quiet peace of their home. After his daring escape from jail, Toad found himself far from the comfort of Toad Hall and the gentle riverbank. He was in the middle of the wild wood, a place full of thick trees, tangled bushes, and shadows that seemed to dance as the wind whispered through the branches. At first, Toad was confused and a little frightened. The wild wood was very different from the sunny rooms of his grand home, or the peaceful river where Rat and Mole liked to spend their days. Here the air was cooler and the sounds were strange, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, and the occasional hoot of an owl. "I must find my way back," Toad muttered to himself, pacing nervously. But the wild wood was tricky. The paths twisted and turned, and every tree looked much like the one before. Toad quickly realized that he could not just charge ahead as he usually did. He needed to be clever and careful. As he moved quietly through the woods, Toad stumbled upon an old horse-drawn caravan parked in a small clearing. The caravan belonged to a band of colorful gypsies who traveled from place to place with music and stories. Toad's eyes lit up with a new idea. Maybe this was another adventure. Without thinking twice, Toad knocked on the caravan door and was soon invited inside. The gypsies welcomed him with warm smiles and lively songs, and Toad felt a spark of excitement. For a while he enjoyed their music, dancing, and the taste of new foods. But Toad's wild nature soon got the better of him. One night when the others were asleep, Toad sneaked out, borrowing one of the horses and the caravan without asking. With a roar of laughter, he took off down the forest paths, crashing through branches and kicking up dust. "Faster! Faster!" he shouted, just like with his motor cars. But the horse was wild and strong, and the caravan swayed dangerously on the bumpy trail. Suddenly, Toad lost control and the caravan crashed into a tree. Toad tumbled out, dazed but unharmed. The horse galloped off into the woods, leaving Toad alone again. "Blast it all!" Toad grumbled, dusting himself off. "This isn't as easy as I thought." Now truly lost, Toad wandered deeper into the wild wood, his pride a little bruised but his spirit still strong. He began to realize that his reckless ways had brought him nothing but trouble. For the first time, Toad thought seriously about how much his friends must worry for him. Meanwhile, Rat, Mole, and Badger had not stopped searching for Toad. They knew he was in danger and that he needed their help. Badger led the search with determination, his strong voice calling through the trees. "Toad, where are you?" he shouted. One afternoon, Rat spotted a figure stumbling through the underbrush. It was Toad, covered in dirt and looking tired but relieved to see his friends. "Toad," Rat exclaimed, "we've been looking everywhere for you." "Toad," Mole said softly, "you must promise to be more careful. We don't want to lose you." Toad nodded a little sheepishly. I know. I've been foolish, but I'm ready to make things right." With their friend safely back, the three of them helped Toad navigate out of the wild wood. It was a slow journey, but Toad listened carefully to their advice and learned to move more quietly and cautiously. When they finally reached the riverbank, Toad felt a wave of relief. The familiar sound of flowing water and the sight of green meadows were like a warm welcome home. "Thank you, my friends," Toad said earnestly. "I've learned a great deal on this wild adventure." Mole smiled. "We're just glad you're safe." Rat added, "And remember, Toad, adventures are fun, but friendship and kindness are the greatest treasures of all." Toad looked out at the sparkling river, his heart full of new hope. He knew that with friends like Rat, Mole, and Badger by his side, he could face whatever came next, this time a little wiser and a lot more careful. After his wild adventures and lessons learned in the wild wood, Toad was ready to return home. But when he arrived back at his beloved Toad Hall, he found something shocking. His grand house was no longer his. A band of badgers, stoats, and weasels had taken over the place. They were rough and mean, and they didn't care about Toad Hall's beauty or its peaceful riverbank neighbors. They had kicked out Toad's servants and were living there like it was their own fortress. Toad was stunned. "This can't be! My home!" he cried, pounding his fist on the door. Rat, Mole, and Badger stood beside him, ready to help their friend reclaim what was his. Badger, who was the strongest and wisest of them all, said, "Toad, we must be careful and clever. We cannot just charge in and fight them. We need a plan." But Toad was too eager to wait. "No more waiting! I want my home back now!" With the help of his friends, Toad began sneaking around the outside of the hall, learning how the enemy was guarding the place. The badgers and weasels were rough and cruel, and they had made the riverbank unsafe for Toad's friends and neighbors. "We need a surprise," Rat whispered. "A clever trick to take back the hall." Mole was nervous. "But what can we do against such fierce enemies?" Badger smiled quietly. "It's not strength alone that wins battles, but courage and friendship." One moonlit night, the four friends crept to the hall's back door. With Badger leading the way, they slipped inside, moving quietly past the guards and finding their way through the grand rooms. Suddenly, a shout echoed through the hall. The enemies had discovered them. But instead of running, Toad stood tall and called out bravely, "This is my home! You have no right to it!" The battle was lively and noisy. Paws clashed, voices shouted, and furniture was overturned. But Toad and his friends fought with courage and cleverness. Rat used his quick thinking to outsmart the weasels, while Mole's determination helped him hold his ground. Badger's strength was mighty, and Toad's fiery spirit inspired them all. After a fierce fight, the badgers, stoats, and weasels were driven out. Toad Hall was free once more. Breathing heavily but smiling wide, Toad looked around his restored home. "Thank you, my friends," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "Without you, I never could have done it." Rat nodded. "That's what friends are for, Toad, to stand by you through thick and thin." Mole grinned. "And to remind you to be careful next time." Toad laughed. Yes, I think I've had enough adventures for a while." The riverbank felt peaceful again, and Toad Hall shone like new under the warm sun. Toad promised to be more thoughtful and to cherish his friends who had helped him so much. And so the wild and wonderful story of Toad, full of mistakes, lessons, and bravery, found its happy chapter. Because no matter how far he wandered, Toad always had a place to call home, and friends who would never give up on him. With Toad Hall safely back in friendly paws, life by the river settled into a happy, peaceful rhythm. Toad, now a little wiser, spent more time with his dear friends Mole, Rat, and Badger. Together they enjoyed the simple pleasures of the river, the gentle breeze, the sparkling water, and the songs of the birds. "Toad," Rat said one afternoon, smiling, "it's nice to see you quiet and content." Toad laughed softly. "Yes, Rat, I think I'm learning that peace can be just as thrilling as any wild adventure." Mole nodded happily. "And it's even better when shared with good friends." The four friends often sat together under the tall trees by the riverbank, telling stories and planning gentle adventures that didn't involve crashing motorcars or wild escapes. Sometimes they would watch the sunset paint the sky in golden pink, feeling grateful for the calm and the comfort of home. One evening, as the fireflies danced and the stars began to twinkle, Toad sighed with contentment. "Home isn't just a place," he said softly. "It's the friends who stand by you, through all your ups and downs." And so, with friendship and kindness to guide them, Mole, Rat, Badger, and Toad lived happily by the river, ready for whatever quiet joys or gentle adventures the next day might bring.